Tapakaya Jadharmasya Sarvadharma Swarupine Tapakaya Jadharmasya Sarvadharma Swarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishna Yate Namah Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Pratyormamritangamaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us bow down to Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of all religions, the Supreme God incarnate. Let us pray to Him to lead us from unreal to the real, to lead us from darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, to lead us from death to immortality. Sri Ramakrishna has given number of instructions how to conduct our spiritual life. He said very specifically that one attains everything when he discovers his true nature. That means when he discovers his true self in himself. That means when one realizes the Atman, then he attains everything. So the object of sadhana is to realize that. But then, since we are born in this world, we are to work. Nobody can be without doing any work. Activity is a law of nature. We appreciate the work. But we should meditate on the spiritual idea, which is also the law of nature. We all think, but think all things except God. Then again, meditation means thinking about God, thinking about the spiritual idea. That means both work and meditation are laws of nature. As we are born, we do act and we do think. But we should know how to integrate work and meditation in order to discover the true self. That is the subject which we are dealing now since last two classes. And meditation as a state is very important for us to know what it means. It is nothing but a simple state of awareness. When you are in that state, you experience deep inner calm. For the first time, you will realize the joy of calmness, the joy of perfect peace is the result of getting the experience of calmness. At times, one may get into this state spontaneously. But usually, it is the result of the practice of the meditative techniques for a long period of time. So meditative techniques are essential or necessary or useful. To the extent that they lead you towards the experience of the awareness of the self. Sometimes, this mental drill, whatever the struggling we are undergoing in the form of spiritual practices, may not produce any noticeable effect. Except the establishment of some order in one's inner life, so much so that many people go on practicing meditation. At least they sit in the meditative posture without actually entering into the meditative state at all. This point is very important for us to think about. What does it mean? Unless your spiritual practices take you towards God, unless you feel the movement of yourself towards the truth, you are not entering the meditative state. You become aware of the experience of the true self when you are able to enter into the realm of the meditation. It is a meditative state that Patanjali means by the term dhyana, and not any meditation technique. He has mentioned some of the techniques, no doubt. They are all methods for fixing the mind at one point, which is called as dharana In fact, all meditation techniques are to be regarded as techniques of dharana. Most of our normal thinking, most of our actions, if we observe, we learn they are compulsive movements controlled almost entirely by the unconscious. They are the result of physiological and psychological conditioning. Meditation is supposed to free us from this kind of existence as an automation. But when done merely as a ritual, following of a technique, meditation itself becomes a sort of conditioning. That's why we find some of the spiritual aspirants, after attaining some kind of progress in spiritual life, they get stuck up in the technique and find themselves unable to move further. The example is given. They are like the spider caught in the web produced by itself. A famous French painter used to ask his students, after teaching them the correct technique, to forget all about it. Why did he say so? For preoccupation with the technique would stifle creativity. In spiritual life, what is really important is the soul's aspiration. Very important point. And its movement towards God. Are you seriously, sincerely aspiring? That's very important. If you are not sincere, if you are not serious about your spiritual aspiration, you will just end up in simple gymnastics of meditation. That's all. The purpose of dharana the techniques applied is only to serve as guideposts or landmarks. When this purpose is forgotten, the techniques become a fence or a wall restricting the freedom and spontaneity of the self, and a barrier on the Godward path. So, the point here to remember is, be very strong in your spiritual aspiration. Very strong you must be. So, whatever we do meditation, whatever work we perform, we should harmonize them. How to do it? The way is to maintain meditative state of consciousness while engaged in external work. That's very important. Maintaining meditative state of consciousness when you are engaging in your external work. What is the meditative state? It's a state of deep interior calm in which the inner self, which is called Pratyagatman, remains as a witness. In all these few classes I am dwelling upon the Vedantic teachings so that you become more and more familiar with the Vedantic ideas which help you to establish inner calmness, which help you to maintain meditative state, which help you to integrate meditation and work. It's a form of experience or perception in which one single thought is maintained for a considerable length of time. It's a state of clear awareness in which the object, the form of a deity, the self, and the connection between them, they are all distinctly perceived. It is also a mode of being, the manner in which the self exists as the witness. It is a state in which will is fully detached from external sensations and internal impulses, and the focusing of consciousness upon an object becomes easy and steady. So will plays a very important role in the fulfillment of your spiritual aspiration. In this state, the difference between work and meditation becomes insignificant. It's a state of consciousness which is independent of external conditions. So the attainment of this state is a first step for combining work and meditation. When the meditative state is reached, the experience of the self as the witness becomes important. The meditative process, the focusing of consciousness becomes important. Let us take an example. Suppose you meditate on Lord Krishna. You start thinking about him, repeating his mantra, concentrating on the lovely form of Lord Krishna. Once you get established in the meditative state, the actual vision of the deity would be not an animation of a picture, but something infinitely more real and splendorous. There is an incident in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. A devotee, a Vaishnava devotee, the worshipper of Sri Ramachandra. His name was Jatadhari. In the course of his wanderings, he came to Dakshineshwar and he met Sri Ramakrishna and he was so happy to be with him for some days. When he was there, in the company of Sri Ramakrishna, Jatadhari, who used to carry always with him a bronze image of Sri Rama, he was worshipping and serving him very devotedly, and he was very sincere about his worship. The result was, he saw life in that bronze image. It was no more a bronze image. It was no more inert idol. It was moving. It was jumping. It was playing. And this devotee, Jatadhari, lost in ecstasy. But this was seen only by Sri Ramakrishna. Nobody else saw that. For anybody, it was only a bronze idol. It's only for Jatadhari, who was worshipping with all devotion. For him, it was more than an idol. Sri Ramakrishna, on account of his perfect state of purity, he could see the movement of Sri Ramachandra playing, dancing with the devotee. Saint Catherine of Siena, she saw the crucifix becoming animated and alive. All these experiences happen in the awakened consciousness of the seer. Awakened consciousness. The Upanishads declare, one of the Upanishads says, Prajnanam Brahma. Prajnanam Brahma. What is God? God is self-awareness. There is only one thing unchanging in the universe, and it is the Atman. It is the self of every being. Everything else is changeable. Everything else is impermanent. God should not be identified with them. God is not changing. God is not impermanent. This is one of the most emphasized and recurring themes in the Upanishads. That's why, realizing the true nature of the self, you become completely fulfilled in your achievement. There's another Upanishad, Kena Upanishad. It says, that which is not seen with the eyes, but by which the activity of the eyes is perceived, know that alone is to be Brahman. Yat chakshusha na pashyati, yena chakshumshi pashyati, tadeva Brahma tvam vidhi. That's the Sanskrit version. The true path of God lies as a luminous tunnel in the inner self. If we want to go deeper into it, we should be free to turn away from the picture objects to the self. It's a very important point which we should all know. When Sri Ramakrishna was initiated by Totapuri, and when he told Sri Ramakrishna to focus on the self, on the Atman, and he told the technique of raising the mind to that level of consciousness, Sri Ramakrishna grasped the idea quickly and began to raise the mind accordingly. But when the mind has to be taken above a particular state of consciousness, he was stuck up by the vision of the Divine Mother, whom he was worshipping all his life before undertaking this Advaita sadhana. But then, after persuasion, after struggling little more, then he could go beyond the form which was obstructing, as it were, his onward movement towards the self. Finally, he got into that state of universal consciousness. That is what is meant here. Generally, people look upon consciousness as something intangible, something impersonal, and powerless, a metaphysical concept with little practical utility. People have all sorts of notions about Vedanta. But according to Vedanta, matter on which we rely so much is itself ultimately derived from consciousness. The whole universe springs from Brahman and is under the control of Brahman. Bhagavad Gita also states that everything in this universe is a manifestation of the glory of Brahman. In the Vibhuti Yoga, you can clearly see this fact. And as Atman, which is our real nature, we are all parts of the infinite reality. Such is the power of consciousness. Again, there's a statement in Kenopanishad which says, Atmana vindate viryam. Through the Atman, one attains strength. It was this vital truth that Swami Vivekananda made the bedrock of his philosophy of life. In the midst of all changes, darkness, sufferings, and ignorance, the true self of man shines unaffected, immutable, immortal, self-luminous, blissful, established in the infinite glory of Brahman. It is the source of all purity, strength, love, knowledge, and freedom. Yet we seek solutions to the problems of life in the outer world, not in or through the Atman. When difficulties come, we don't turn inward to the source of all power and knowledge, but depend on material things and on worldly people. Swami Vivekananda has repeatedly pointed out all misery is caused. Why? It is because of our dependence on matter. It is not possible to carry on both work and meditation unless we reach a point from where we can freely maneuver both. We should reach that point. The inner self is that point. A spiritual aspirant must have great faith in the power of self-awareness. Swami Vivekananda insisted on this point. The next point, which is very important for our subject, is the power of divine creativity. The ignorance of the cosmic nature of all activity is another obstacle in the advanced stages of meditation. Modern science tells that every object and particle in the universe is in ceaseless motion, and all physical, chemical and biological changes take place in accordance with universal laws. All psychological processes like the rise and interaction of ideas and emotions are also governed by the universal laws of the mental world. This fact points to the existence of a primordial creative impulse, an eternal divine momentum sustaining the whole cosmos, and of which all individual changes and activities are parts. God is the unmoved prime mover from whom has streamed forth this eternal cosmic momentum, and Bhagavad Gita exhorts us to take refuge in him. Tameva chadyam purusham prapadye yata parvartihi prasatha purani. This means that even meditation is a part of divine activity. Meditation is also activity. After a good meditation, we feel elated, and when we make some progress in meditative life, we take the credit for it. But all inner transformations are brought about by whom? By divine power. If we have attained joy and progress in meditation, it is because we have opened our hearts more to the divine current. If we have not attained much progress, it is only because our ignorance and egoism have blocked the free movement of the universal spiritual current. Ignorance and egoism, they are the stumbling blocks. The important point to note here is that it is a divine power which is the symbol of the meditation image that transforms our consciousness. Once we accept the spiritual ideal and attune our mind to it, what happens? The divine current goes on producing changes in us at subliminal levels. Even in sleep, transformation continues to take place. The more we open our hearts to the divine grace, the more quickly we progress. Opening our heart is important. So, now comes the next point, the power of aspiration. If our real nature is the witnessing self, and if all physical and mental activities are going on spontaneously, how does the self get involved in work? How do we manipulate and appropriate to ourselves the cosmic activity of the divine. In other words, what is the connecting link between pure awareness and work? Herein comes Vedanta. The Vedantic view is that the inner self exerts its influence on the body and mind through the will, known by such terms as kratu, dhriti, and ichcha. These are all various terms used for will. See, will is very important. It may be compared to the magnetic field that exists around a magnet. Will may be compared to the magnetic field that exists around a magnet. Through its field, a magnet can act upon a metal object without coming into contact with it. Similarly, through the will, the self influences the body and mind and external objects. There is another Upanishad called Aitareya Upanishad. It tells that the will is an Atma Dharma, a function of the self. As such, it is different from desires. It is different from instincts. It is different from emotions. It is different from mental images, ideas, and so on, which are functions of the mind. Many desires and impulses constantly rise in our minds. But the will gets connected only to a few of them. When the will catches a desire or impulse, it becomes a sankalpa, intentional motivation. Through it, the self owns that particular desire. Those desires which are not thus appropriated by the self fade away without giving us any trouble. When the will is directed towards God, it becomes spiritual aspiration, yearning for God. This is the motive power in sadhana. The greater the aspiration, that is to say, the more intensively the will is focused Godward, the quicker and the spiritual progress we will have. Once we reach the meditative state, we have only to aspire intensely for God. If you take Sri Ramakrishna's life, you will see how. Through his constant devotional practices and worship of the Divine Mother, the intensity of his yearning was becoming more and more deeper. It reached the maximum point. It reached the maximum point. It must result in some illumination. So, finally, Sri Ramakrishna was engulfed by the bliss. The whole temple was filled up by luminous consciousness. The whole thing was just shining with wonderful light. This experienced gave Sri Ramakrishna tremendous calmness, tremendous joy. So once we reach the meditative state, we have only to aspire intensely for God. Keep the will focused upon the divine. Keep the will connected to the divine. Don't connect the will to desires. That's the point. Everything else that we need will be done by the divine. This is one of the fundamental teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. He has emphasized greatly the importance of aspiration in spiritual life. He did not merely teach that one could realize God through any path. He did not merely teach that one could realize God through any path, but he qualified this teaching with the class provided one had intense yearning for God. Then follow any path. But yearning for God must be there. Without that, it will be simply a drill. He once told a group of devotees, oh, that restlessness is a whole thing. Whatever path you follow, whether you are a Hindu, whether you are a Muslim, whether you are a Christian, whether you are a Shakta, Vaishnava or Brahmo, the vital point is Vyakulata. How intensely you aspire. That's the important point. It doesn't matter if you take even a wrong path. Only you must be restless to have the experience of the truth. Then God himself will put you on the right path. These are the words of Sri Ramakrishna. God being the Supreme Self, his presence is felt in the center of one's inner self. So aspiration for God is only an expansion of the aspiration for one's own true self. It's called Atmakama. Directing the will towards God really means directing it towards one's own self. Reversing the focus of the will upon its source, which is the inner self. This cannot, however, be done all on a sudden. The will has to be detached progressively from its former moorings and has to be directed towards the inner self by stages. The disciplines of karma yoga and meditation are mainly intended to fulfill these two functions respectively. So, in the next class, I will try to speak on what are the stages in the operation of the will. It's a very important subject. All these are important for us. By getting rid of bad impulses, by getting rid of unwanted, unpleasant emotions. That's possible only by engaging in spiritual activities, maintaining meditative awareness. With these words, I conclude my talk. Page 526. As Narendra sang the line, And he who chants thy name becomes immortal. The master went into samadhi. At first his fingers, especially the thumbs, began to tremble. The devotees from Konnagar had never seen the master in samadhi. Seeing him silent, they were about to leave the room. Bhavanath said to them, "Why are you going away? This is his samadhi." The devotees resumed their places. Narendra sang, "I have labored day and night to make thy seat within my heart. Wilt thou not be kind to me, O Lord of the world, and enter there?" Sri Ramakrishna, still in the ecstatic mood, came down from his couch in the floor and sat by Narendra. The beloved disciple sang again. In wisdom's firmament, the moon of love is rising full, and love's flood tide in surging waves is flowing everywhere. O Lord, how full of bliss thou art, victory unto thee. As Narendra sang the last line, Sri Ramakrishna stood up, still absorbed in samadhi. After a long time, the master regained partial consciousness of the world and sat down on the mat. Narendra finished his singing, and the Tanpura was put back in its place. The master was still in a spiritual mood and said, "Mother, tell me, what is this? They want someone to extract the butter for them and hold it to their mouths. They won't throw the spiced bait into the lake. They won't even hold the fishing rod. Someone must catch the fish and put it into their hands. How troublesome. Mother, I won't listen to any more argument. The rogues force it on me. What a bother. I shall shake it off. God is beyond the Vedas and their injunctions. Can one realize him by studying the scriptures, the Vedas and the Vedanta? To Narendranath, Sri Ramakrishna asked, "Do you understand this? The Vedas give only a hint." Narendra wanted the Tanpura again. The master said, "I want to sing." He was still in an ecstatic mood, and the master sang, "Mother, this is a grief that sorely grieves my heart, that even with thee for mother, and though I am wide awake, there should be robbery in my house." The master said, "Mother, why do you make me argue?" He sang again, "Once for all, this time I have thoroughly understood. From one who knows it well, I have learned the secret of bhava." The master said, "I am quite conscious," but he was still groggy with divine fervor. He sang once more, "I drink no ordinary wine, but wine of everlasting bliss. As I repeat my mother Kali's name, it so intoxicates my mind that people take me to be drunk." Sri Ramakrishna had said, "Mother, I won't listen to any more argument." Narendra sang, "O mother, make me mad with thy love. What need have I of knowledge or reason?" Sri Ramakrishna said with a smile, "O mother, make me mad. God cannot be realized through knowledge and reasoning, through the arguments in the scriptures." He had been pleased with the singing of the musician from Konnagar and said to him humbly, "Please sing about the Divine Mother. Please, one song." Musician said, "You must excuse me, sir." Master, bowing with folded hands, "No, sir, I can enforce this demand." Saying this, Sri Ramakrishna sang a few lines from a kirtan, assuming the attitude of a gopi. "Radha has every right to say it. She has kept awake for Krishna. She has stayed awake all night and she has every right to be picked. Then he said to the musician, "My dear sir, you are a child of the Divine Mother. She dwells in all beings. Therefore, I have every right to enforce my demand." A farmer said to his guru, "I shall get my mantra from you by beating you if I have to." Musician smilingly said, "By a shoe beating?" Master smiled, No, I won't go that far." Again, in abstracted mood, Sri Ramakrishna said, "The beginner, the struggling, the perfect and the supremely perfect. Which are you? Perfect or supremely perfect? Come along, sing for us." The musician complied. He sang just a melody. Master said, "My dear sir, that too makes me happy." The musician then sang a song. When the music was over, the devotees from Konnaga saluted the master and took their leave. The sadhaka bowed before him with folded hands and said, "Holy man, let me say goodbye." Sri Ramakrishna, still in an ecstatic mood, was talking to the Divine Mother. Master said, "Mother, is it you or I? Do I do anything?" No, it is you." "Was it you who heard the arguments all this time? Or was it I?" "No, not I. It was you." Sri Ramakrishna became conscious of the outer world and began to converse with Narendra, Bhavanath and the other devotees. They were talking about the sadhaka. We shall continue next Tuesday.